This is Duke University.
This is an amazing initiative, this week of events. I'm going to start by introducing myself, then I'm going to introduce Hal. Please, Hal, jump in and say any words that you would like to give today and provide context for the event. And then we'll start with the introductions and then some questions we've already outlined in advance. But thanks all for being here. Rainy day for those in Durham, North Carolina. Hope you're doing well. So my name is Patrick Semler. People call me Ricky. You can call me either. It's great to meet you and see those of you who I have already met and already know. I am the Senior Program Coordinator at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies here at Duke University. Newish in the area, and I'm loving it. Moved here from Utah. I am the director of our undergraduate certificate, and I'm also the director of our graduate certificate. I teach a couple courses too, so many ways I meet folks across campus. This initiative was one of the very first things that I got to be involved with when I came to Duke, largely through Hal Matthews' creative and encouraging, inviting, and innovative mind and presence. He and I talked about how we could do a better job, and I really just followed his lead about opening doors for career opportunities, but largely through information sharing, right? Building through the networks that are already so rich and already so have such a global span from Duke community, alumni. So this is just great. This is the second year of the Global Career Week that has happened. This year it's happening a bit different. We focused a bit more virtual to make sure that we could involve more alumni. And Hal, I'll stop. Would you like to say anything before I advance a little more?
That was great. Just want to thank you all for being here. I know we have a small but very tightly knit community of students at Duke who are really eager to explore working in new countries and regions of the world. So super grateful for our panelists to be here and share your insights. You're such a good source of information that isn't always easily accessible from Duke's campus. So big thank you. Really excited to hear your stories. And we do have one more panel happening tomorrow at 8 p.m. on careers in Asia, primarily with a focus on East Asia. So if anyone is curious about that, you can check that out on Handshake as well. But I won't take up any more time, Ricky.
No, I appreciate it. It's so great to hear from you. All right. So I'm just going to give a few more minutes, hopefully not too much more, to talk about how the panel was constructed for today. As you can imagine, there is an amazing list of Duke alumni working across the world, across Latin America. There are leaders basically in every field that are Duke alumni, and that's amazing. I mean, it's so wonderful to see that. We tried to determine in my very overwhelming look at this big list and search folks who work in different fields and in different international contexts. So not necessarily only one country, right? And I think you'll see that all of our panelists have experience in multiple countries and regions and or work that spans multiple countries and regions, such as a product that is really for Latin America at large, right? So we're hopefully going to focus on like a multinational context here, but also really not losing that hyper-local context, right? Not speaking about Latin America or any global region as a monolith, really respecting and understanding the linguistic, cultural variation, histories, and current context, right? So I think that we're going to have really great discussions. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to at least name the panelists, say a couple more things, and then we'll jump in. So first we have, and we don't have to go in this order. You all can change it once we go in. But on my page, we have Johanna Roldán, is the Senior Interagency Coordination Officer at UNHCR, Regional Office for the Americas in Panama. She is currently in Panama. Joanna, any correction on name title? Amazing. Thank you so much. We also have Cipriano Echeverria, and Cipriano is a co-founder and CEO of Paloma. We're excited to learn more about what Paloma is, and we're going to do that shortly. Works in Colombia. All correct, Cipriano? Wonderful. Thank you.
That's
And then
right.
we have Patricia Deza. Patricia Deza is an associate at CPP Investments and is working in Brazil. Wonderful. Okay, can't wait. So at the Center for Latin American Studies, we try to really participate on campus for all things Latin America and the Caribbean the best we can. That means academic preparation. That means summer research funding or academic year research funding. That means language instruction with our colleagues who work on language. That means events like this, global career preparation. One of the things that we're going to be announcing shortly, I don't want to miss the chance to tell you, is our yearly competitions for our summer research money. So you can go to Latin America, work on a research project. We have funds for undergraduate students, we have funds for graduate students, and we have funds for faculty. I'm about to send those out as far and wide as I can possibly do so across campus this week. So if anyone's interested, doesn't know about that, I'm making the plug now. We hope to help facilitate that important experience for as many of you as we can. So without any ado, so Latin America is incredibly diverse. There are more than 500 languages spoken in Latin America. It is a region with various histories and contexts that can't be summed up any way monolithically. And so I think the fact that we have 3 guests that span different fields and can help us understand local context while still trying to understand some shared histories and interconnections across different regions will be really important. We're going to do our best and hopefully all treat the region with the respect it deserves as being a region full of leaders in every single space globally, right? In global space of every field in the public sector, the private sector, and yeah, move beyond stereotypes and try to think how we can think in more detail and learn from one another and with a lens of reciprocity. And that's where I'll leave it. I'm gonna, bueno, pues yo les doy la bienvenida en español también. Hoy el evento sí es en inglés, pero si alguien quiere hacer una pregunta en español, en portugués, todo bien, en otro idioma, vamos a hacer lo posible y platicar juntos, pero sí para los integrantes participantes de aquí que quizás no hablan el español, hemos decidido no charlar en el inglés. Without any further ado, we're going to give 5 minutes to all the different panelists to briefly describe your career trajectory, the work you're doing now, where you have worked in the region, or what the span of your work entails in the region. And I'm going to do the thing that I don't love, which is be timekeeper. And I'm going to send just direct messages to our panelists when the time's about up at 5 minutes, just so we can then move on to our next questions. I'm just going to follow the totally random order of names I gave, unless anyone would like to change that and go in a different order. I had Johanna, Cipriano, then Patricia. Sound good, or alteration? Anyone? All right, Johanna, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick, Hall, and everyone for being here. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be here with you and share a bit of what my journey with UNHCR has been. So yeah, my name is Johanna. I'm an Ecuadorian lawyer. I specialize in international refugee law. And I'm a very proud Dookie. I hold a master's degree in law from the Duke Law School. I graduated in 2013, so over 10 years now. And I began my career with the UN Refugee Agency in Ecuador, my home country, in 2006. Where I contributed to developing and implementing asylum and solutions policies for Colombian refugees. Because at that time, Ecuador was the largest hosting country of Colombian refugees. Then my work has also taken me to sub-Saharan Africa, where I served Sudanese refugees in Chad and Congolese and Burundian refugees in Rwanda. Additionally, I also work in Southeast Asia, particularly in Thailand, and I manage a project aimed at reducing statelessness and granting nationality to indigenous groups. In 2019, I came back to the Americas and I joined the UNHCR team in Mexico, where I provided technical support to strengthen the asylum system in that country. Just out of curiosity, Mexico was at that time the 3rd top country receiving asylum claims globally after the US and Germany. And most recently, in May last year, I have taken on a new challenge as the Senior Interagency Coordination Officer for the UN Refugee Agency for the Americas. We have a regional bureau in Panama. So I'm based here and my work revolves around regional processes on asylum and migration governance in the region. So these are intergovernmental processes led by states where they gather together and discuss about, for example, asylum policies, integration policies, benefiting both refugees and migrants in the region. So my journey with the UN has been incredibly rewarding, and it has allowed me to make a meaningful impact on the lives of refugees and contribute to the broader humanitarian efforts in the region and beyond. I'm really excited to continue this work, and I look forward to connecting with the rest of the panelists and with all of you today. Thank you, and back to you, Patrick.
Amazing. I'm really excited to hear more about your journey and some of the insights that you can share with us from that. It's awesome. It spans multiple regions of Latin America and contexts and other regions of the world, such as Africa. Fantastic. So we'll hear next from Cipriano. I can't wait to hear from you as well. Thank you, Cipriano. I've read a lot about all of you and chatted with you all through email. So for me, this is especially exciting.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah. Again, thank you for the invite. My journey is a bit shorter than Johanna's. I'm originally from Colombia, from Medellin, Colombia. Born and raised here. I did my undergrad at Duke, class of 2019. I did economics and decision sciences. Sorry, give me 1 second. My job is killing me with the notification. Sorry, yeah, it doesn't stop. So I graduated 2019 from my undergrad at Duke. I went to New York and did 2 years in investment banking, Morgan Stanley, and financial sponsors. I always, since I left Colombia, I knew I wanted to come back and do something more entrepreneurial. And when I was sitting in New York at Morgan Stanley, something really curious happened, and I had an offer for General Atlantic, which is a large private equity firm. But when I was sitting down in my desk, I realized there was a plaque with different names of people who had sat down in the same desk. And one of the names among like a bunch of really American names was the name of someone called David Bellis. And I Googled David Bellis, and I found out he was the founder and CEO of Nubank, who was the largest digital bank in Brazil at the time. He was a billionaire. So I take a picture of that plaque. I ping David through LinkedIn. And I'm like, hey man, crazy coincidence. David's Colombian, another Colombian sitting in the same desk at Morgan Stanley. Can we chat? I didn't think he was going to respond. David gets back to me in like 20 seconds and was like, for sure, happy to chat. I get on the phone with David and I was like, look, I mean, my objective is being an entrepreneur like you. I have this offer for a private equity firm that is pretty recognized. What do you recommend? And he was like, dude, I'm going in 2 weeks to Colombia to announce that we're launching Nubank's office in Colombia. Why don't you come join kind of like the launching team in the country? So I was like, why not? I quit my job at Morgan Stanley in 2021. I come down to Colombia as the third employee of Nubank Colombia, with kind of like 2 clear objectives. 1, helping launch the business in Colombia, and then 2, finding an issue to then kind of like build my own business. I stayed in Nubank almost 2 years. We began with 0 customers in the country, grew the business to almost 1.5 million customers in 2 years. Mainly focused in Colombia, but working a bunch with the Nubank office in Brazil, also the Nubank office in Mexico. And then I found a big pain in a similar market to Nubank, but in a different vertical, that is property managers. And I basically decided to start Paloma as kind of like a digital bank for property managers across LATAM. Left Nubank at the end of 2022. Had the fortune of getting into Y Combinator, which is kind of like one of the best accelerators of the world. We were funded by YC in January 2023. We raised our seed round in June 2023 by NFX, which is a large kind of pre-seed seed fund from the US. And since then, we've been executing and building a bank, basically a digital bank for property managers across LATAM. We're mainly focused in Colombia, but we now have customers in Mexico and Chile. We're actually now looking for our first customers in the US with the view of not only building a Latin American business, but a global business. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Thank you, Cipriano. Yeah, one of the reasons I was really excited about your work is that it's definitely had multiple international elements, of course, but seeing the product that you're building that you built now and the span across different regions of Latin America, I'll be really excited when we get into more detail as well to learn what that looks like across Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, for example, right? That'll be really exciting to hear more about that. But thank you. That's amazing. It's so good to hear more of your backstory. I'm looking forward to the next questions. Thanks. Now we'll hear from Patricia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for the invite. I'm Patricia Deza. I graduated from Duke undergrad in 2016. I double majored in economics and public policy. When I was at Duke, I wasn't really sure about what I wanted to do. So I was sort of exploring everything. And in my senior year, I took a few finance classes and I absolutely loved them. And so I decided to pursue that type of career path. But like Cipriano, I knew I wanted to explore and to live in Latin America for a bit, to work here with the boots on the ground. And so I went back to Peru and I worked at a real estate private equity fund, a local one that invested across Latin America. I worked there for a couple of years, but I knew that real estate really wasn't my thing. I was looking for a type of industry where I could see the intersection of finance and my interest in public policy. And that's why infrastructure was sort of the perfect industry for someone like me. And that's how I ended up working at CPPIB, which is a Canadian pension fund. Canadian pension funds in general are very big players in the infrastructure space. So the one that I work for manages around $500 billion. And we have approximately like $13 billion in investments in infrastructure in Latin America, which is pretty large for such a small market. And so for me, this type of work has been very rewarding because we invest in companies that have a huge impact in each of the countries in the region. These are countries that provide basic services, water, sanitation, electricity. And so that's one of my favorite parts of my job, just knowing how important these companies can be for the entire region. And in addition to my work at the pension fund, I co-founded a nonprofit organization called Women in Finance Latin America. So we started the nonprofit in Peru, and then we expanded the work that we did to Chile, to Colombia. We did a lot of mentoring for young professionals, and these became very, very popular. We ended up having last year over 100 mentees. And some of our mentors were CFOs, MDs of some of the most important companies in the region. And so it was a very, one of the most rewarding parts of my work was having an impact in young professional women's careers. And I forgot to mention that I currently based in Sao Paulo. So I'm Peruvian, I speak Spanish, but I decided to move to Sao Paulo 4 years ago for CPPIB, and it's been quite an adventure. And I can share more about, navigating another different country because, I also lived in the U.S., learning a new language from scratch. So it's been quite an adventure.
Thanks, Patricia. We were chatting about this, you and I, earlier, but that was there's many elements of your work that I thought was going to be perfect for this panel, but especially living and working in Brazil. We often talk about Latin America and the Caribbean, and people like code out Brazil in this really problematic way. And it's very important to think about how Portuguese language, as well as other languages in Brazil, interact with the rest of the region, and the economies and other sectors intersect. It's going to be great to hear more of the details and how that's worked for you and your time in Brazil as well. This is fantastic. Thank you all. So I have a few questions that we've sent to the panelists. We've talked about in advance. We've also got a pretty extensive list from you all. We're not going to get to every single one of them, but I'm going to start with the ones that we've identified. Hopefully there's going to be at least some general themes that we can address some of what you all want to hear, but we will leave space at the end, and I can try to point out some of the ones that you sent in advance, or we can just let you all ask them yourselves. But the first one I want to ask, it is a little broad, and you have mentioned some pieces, but could you all, and this will be popcorn style, please, with our three panelists, could you all speak to, or whoever would like to go first, that element of building the professional network, right? What that's meant for you in Latin America, across regions, in the local context, how you've built your networks and what tips you have. I mean, these could be global tips, but things that might feel especially helpful for someone who's thinking about living in the region.
I can start if you want. I think what I would say is different to the US. Like obviously Duke has a strong name, but it doesn't have as an extensive of a network by nature of not being a Latin American school. So I think the initial start of networking differs from the US, where it's less on the alumni network and more so on other type of networks. What has worked for me personally, I would say, has been two things. One is what I would call like networking by reputation. So I focused on kind of like building a reputation on either LinkedIn or several social media on kind of like certain aspects that I know pretty well. In my case, it was fintech. I've done like I did my career at Morgan Stanley, then I worked at Nubank. So I become sort of a thought leader on the fintech space in LATAM. And that has opened doors with a bunch of interesting people in Latin America that recognize, for example, the value of like a US base or Duke education. So I would say one advice I would give is obviously like Duke doesn't have as large as an alumni network as it does have in the US, but it does have a strong brand name that if you build on top of that and become kind of in an expert manner, will open you doors. That's one thing. And then the second thing I would say is a little bit more applicable to my scenario, but they're really strong kind of like local company networks. In my case, like Nubank is probably, or I would say is the most successful company in the region. It's a public company. Nubank hires internationally. It doesn't only hire like the Latin American people. So maybe like looking to get your foot in the door to Latin American like space through companies like Nubank that have like an international hiring process. That's a really good place to start to like building a local Latin American network.
Tricia, do you want to go next or?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Thanks, Johanna. So for me, I'm gonna start by saying and giving the caveat that I'm not the most outgoing person. So I always found networking a bit unnatural. It didn't come very naturally to me because sometimes when you go to these networking events with all the banks and all the consulting firms or all the companies, it can be a bit overwhelming and a bit fake, in my opinion. So for me, I always struggled with that. And so I turned to more like natural connections. So for example, when I went back to Peru, I reconnected with my original like high school network. Maybe some of you did not go to school in Latin America, but another thing that I did was cold call or contact people via LinkedIn. I wasn't a huge fan of doing that, to be honest. It did help to a certain extent. And I think it's good to, get yourself out there and, meet different people through that, that tool. I think that's very helpful. But overall, I think I lean towards the more organic ways to build your network. So basically with the people that you're currently working with, that can definitely open doors. And in terms of, finding jobs, because I think that sometimes like your network really opens doors for other employment opportunities. I would say that networking also with recruiters can make a big difference. So if recruiters reach out to you via LinkedIn, make sure that you answer to those emails, even if you're not interested in the position. That's especially after you get your first job. Probably you'll get a lot of those LinkedIn messages. But yeah, I mean, I would highlight trying to do it as organically as possible with people that you connect with.
Right. So in my case, I think joining, such a big and a structured international organization as the UN has provided me the opportunity to connect with multiple stakeholders, from government officials to NGOs to community leaders. And I empathize with Patricia when she was sharing that for her, it doesn't feel natural to do the networking. But I guess the only way to grow into that role is by exposing yourself to doing so. And in my case, I remember starting with local NGOs, so local community leaders, where the conversations are more candid and informal, but also it helps you to build rapport and to build trust with them. And in Latin America, I feel it's very important to maintain and to nurture those relationships so that then you can get access to other layers within their structures. So another example is attending workshops, conferences, seminars, where you can meet, like-minded professionals, and also learn from there. Maybe some of them could become mentors for you, or if there is a mentorship program in an area that you're interested, that was also helpful. Also when you do advocacy work, and if you're interested in working in developing public policy, well, I guess other tools like Cipriano and Patricia both mentioned LinkedIn, or share human stories through your social media, connecting with other people after attending a workshop, a conference, could also be, a tool to further engage with key stakeholders. But in the case of my work with the UN, building trust with your interlocutors has been really key to advance on our programs. I can share for an example, most recently in Mexico, where, by the way, the Duke Alumni Network helped me to connect with other law firms in the country, and we created a pro bono ally or network that wanted to support and provide free legal representation to refugees in Mexico. But you have to nurture that relationship and offer also some kind of services or support or training to them so that they keep engaged with your work.
I love this. This is so great. I feel like I have 3 follow-up questions for each of you, but I'm not going to do that and make it about my further inquiries. But I think you all had such rich answers with key, concrete examples. There was a lot of shared themes that I think really have to do with respecting local communities, and respect means engagement, and engagement beyond your sphere, right? So entering a local context and learning about what's happening, and not assuming a knowledge of how the structure operates, because that really varies place to place. Who are the local leaders? What kind of events are taking place? Who are the stakeholders? And I think you all touched on that, building outside of really the expected parameters of your field. Like, no one really stays in that rigid lane, right? Or I would say few people who end up being successful stay in that. And I'll just share quickly, because I really enjoy history and current context and current events and politics. I mean, in the general sense, not always like a partisan. I'm meaning just like current events, right? I feel from the time that I've lived in Paraguay, I've lived in Argentina, and I've lived in the border region of Mexico and the United States. But having a serious engagement with local issues, and hopefully not in a bombastic or kind of dogmatic way, right? But in a respectful and serious way, goes so far. You meet people all over the place. You meet people in so many contexts when you're engaged in the local community and you care what's going on. And so that happens not only by reading kind of local sources, which you should be reading, but also engaging with local community, right? That's going to help you in every single sector. And I think you all gave concrete examples of that. That's great. Okay, I have a couple other questions. I was going to swap the order, but I think I'm going to just run with the order I have still. So in terms of cultural or business etiquette that you might see as different or distinct? I don't want you to necessarily have to generalize or broadly speak about Latin America, but maybe context you've seen. Is there anything you could share around and I don't even just mean like private sector business, but just professional setting, professional etiquette. One example I can think of is for me, and I'll just speak personally, but WhatsApp is an important mode of communication, and I think that that's not necessarily true for every pocket of the planet, but it's definitely true for many of the communities that I know and am connected to in Latin America. So that's just something to say. It's a professional platform, and it's a very, very common platform for communication, right? That shouldn't be downplayed at all. But that's one example. But I'll open the floor. Yeah, what are some specific professional etiquette, cultural elements you might know?
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Well, yeah, as you said, Patrick, without generalizing, but understanding and respecting cultural nuances can definitely help you build stronger and more effective professional relationships in Latin America and in every other region. So to start, building personal relationships is crucial. I think in Latin America, we prefer doing business with those that we know and we trust. So showing, genuine concern about family, about interests, about personal life, it's very common. So that'll be one suggestion. Another one is greetings. We are very warm here, and we when we greet somebody, we include a handshake, a hug, or even a kiss on the cheek, depending on the country and the level of familiarity. And when we arrive at the room, you always greet everyone individually when you arrive and when you leave the room. Communication style tends to be also more indirect. So reading between the lines and understanding, nonverbal cues and body language, it's very important. Punctuality, I know it's valued in business settings, but in Latin America, it tends to be a bit more relaxed. So it's important to be on time, but also to be prepared to show some flexibility. Another issue would be respecting authority. Titles and formalities are often used. Maybe that's different in Cipriano's and Patricia's fields, but in my field, working with governments, that's very important. And then, of course, as you mentioned, language. Well, in Latin America, Spanish and Portuguese are the primary languages. So it's important to make the effort, at least to speak the language, or if not, at least some basic terms or phrases that show, again, genuine concern and interest for the region and the communities that you're working with.
Yeah, no, I think Joanna hit a lot of points. I would probably just add maybe like three things on my context, like a little bit more on the business side. One thing is small talk. I think building on on Joanna's like less direct interactions, like there's a big expectation of like the first 5 minutes of a meeting or the last 5 minutes of a meeting, you're probably doing small talk. That's very different to how it used to operate in the US, where you would start the meeting at the hour o'clock and get right into the point. Like you probably talk about yesterday's soccer match or something unrelated to the meeting for the first 5 minutes. That's crucial. The second thing I would say is as Patrick mentioned, like WhatsApp, not only on the communication sense, but basically email is non-existent. And in my case, like all like a lot of like commercial proposals, like contracts, like I'm not sending those through email, I'm sending those through WhatsApp, which can be like crazy in the US, but it's also how things work here in in Latin America. And the third thing I would say, and this might be a generalization, but at least like in New York, like outside work drinks are really common. What I've realized at least in Colombia, is the culture of work of drink outside of working or on working days is at least not as prevalent. Like, it's more common to go for like a work coffee than it is to go for like work drinks. I haven't seen a lot of like work drinks here in Latin America, as I have seen in the US. Again, might be a little bit of a generalization, but it's just like my experience. I've seen way more like work lunches or work coffees on my end.
Yeah, and maybe for me, hard to add because I think that you guys have already covered a lot of the key points. Just again, emphasizing that it's not as structured as an environment. So we're a bit more flexible, not only in terms of time, like when you're like punctuality, but also in terms of like deadlines, maybe like, oh, it's the Latin American deadline. I mean, yesterday I'm working on a project with a North American team, and I was surprised to see that they had a schedule for what they were going to do every day, and that's not something that my team does, for example. But also, and maybe this is a good segue to your next question, Patrick, the importance of speaking the language. So it's the best way you can connect with people and build strong relationships with them. I will never forget that when I first arrived here in Brazil, I didn't speak the language at all. And I spoke to everyone in English. And I remember that we had some international visitors coming. And I heard a friend of mine complaining like, oh, we have international visitors. We have to switch to English. How annoying. And that's when it hit me, like, even though I don't speak very well Portuguese and I feel safer speaking in English, I need to make an effort and just, give it a go and make mistakes. And honestly, people appreciate that so much. And they're very, I mean, they won't mind if you make mistakes. They just appreciate the effort. And so I would say that speaking the language is a key part of building a good business relationship and in general connecting with people here, because it's also worth highlighting that you cannot assume that everyone speaks English. So, and sometimes people don't speak English as well as you would expect. So just highlighting the importance of the language.
Cipriano, please.
For a project, I just thought about the last one that actually working hours. US tends to start on the later end in the morning and end on the later side in the afternoon. Latin Americans, in my experience, are early risers, and I think a great example of that is in my local colleges. The earliest class is I think 5:30 a.m. and the earliest class at Duke is 8:30 a.m. So and it's actually a thing. Like in New York, I would start at 9:30 a.m. Here people start 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning. They start working. Sorry, Patricia, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just
no worries. I was done.
I love this. I was gonna call your name there, Cipriano, make sure I saw your hand. I'm trying to help be the bridge moderator, but you both given like the perfectly like softball questions or comments, a few of you, for language that I've spoken about this with many of you, but the importance of language, right? So always being a lifelong learner, I think of the languages that are our first languages or our second or our multiple languages, and understanding that those languages are in evolution and they are not static and they have local context as well. So with Spanish, even if someone is a first language speaker, that varies the use of vos across countries that use vos primarily, or tu and usted, the way that usted is used, and the way that local terms are used as well. There shouldn't be an assumed monolithic approach for Spanish language. And then that goes as well for Portuguese. I'm a huge advocate of indigenous languages, learning indigenous languages, speaking indigenous languages. That might sound daunting. That might seem like something you can't fit in your studies, though I think many of you can and might and should. That's up to you. But learning words, for example, if you work in Mexico, if you do a basic course in Nahuatl, you will be able to pronounce place names a lot better, right? And that's something that you have access to. There's a lot of ways you can learn basic phrases, and that's something that we could discuss more about. I would love to hear some of the panelists talk about that language in detail, language variation, how you've seen your, for lack of a better term, code switching, right? In different contexts, how you operate with your language variation. Whoever can jump in. I'm not calling on people. Sorry, I should. Yeah, anyone, please unmute.
Yeah, I mean, happy to get started. I think that as a native Spanish speaker, overall, you sort of have an advantage. And yes, there are many different accents, different ways of pronouncing words. But in general, I think you can get by, you can get the gist of it, you can fully understand what someone else is saying. I think that when it comes to Portuguese, sometimes people say, oh, Portuguese is just like Spanish. It's the same. Once you know Spanish, you know Portuguese. I think that's a bit of a lie. You can understand, you can get the general message, but if you really want to understand everything, you do need to study Portuguese. And just like Spanish, Portuguese, at least, Portuguese from Portugal and Portuguese from Brazil is very, very different. Whenever I have calls with people who speak Portuguese from Portugal, I don't understand a thing. It's that different. So I think that when it's not your first language, maybe it can be more challenging. And even within a country, there are many different accents. So I think it's just important the only way to really get by is to practice, get used to hearing the different accents. That's what I did when it came to Portuguese, because even within Brazil, there are so many different types of accents. So yeah, it's all about practice, I would say.
On my end, like the comparison I draw is, yeah, I mean, you need to speak the local language if you want to do business down here. Like the English as universal language, it gets you by maybe if you're a tourist, but if you are serious about doing business, I mean, which is kind of my angle, you need to speak the local language. So that's just what I would add.
Yes, on my end, I think it's also important to adapt your communication style depending on your audience. For example, if you're speaking to government officials, it's a more formal etiquette, more technical language. But if you're speaking to community leaders, then you need to use a more simplified language, closer to their interests, to their concerns. And also be mindful that, as Patricia was saying, not because you are a native Spanish speaker, a term would mean the same in all the different countries in our region. For example, once I was interviewing an asylum seeker, and that he was also a Spanish speaker, and in my understanding, he was telling me that he had fled his country because he was bored. And I was like, well, that it's not enough, to argue that he's being persecuted and needs international protection. But actually, the term meant depressed because of the persecution that he was facing. And just to mention an example on the top of my mind. And of course, if you want to increase credibility and be able to advocate for your cause or do a pitch on your business, you do have to manage certain level of language, including some idioms or local phrases, showing your interest and your knowledge, of the country, the region, or the community that you're working with.
Yeah, this is awesome. And again, that ties back to some of the previous comments about engagement with local community. I mean, you get that through local contacts, whether that's the soccer match, you're really excited, the football match, you're excited to talk about the next day, or the event you went to, or, that's engagement with the community. That's not only just studied in books. So that's super important. I have a list. I sent this to the panelists as well. We're not going to get to everything, but I did notice some themes from what people submitted in advance. So I'll combine a couple of them and just lay them out on the virtual table, and then also wait for others to join in. You can add questions in the chat or maybe just unmute. But I think a couple of things I saw in the questions here and that Hal and I were discussing, if you have ideas for employment pathways, you've mentioned a lot of great tips, but things that might work more specifically. If somebody say they've never been a resident of Latin America and they want to relocate there, so about professional pathways if it's maybe your first time living in the region. And then zooming in deeper on that question, the resume. There were questions about resumes. Is there a difference in the format of resumes, the distribution of resumes, how like the resume game, if you will, operates? And then others, please jump in. That was also the segue into like, these are your questions, audience. Please jump in. We have at least one question in the chat.
Maybe I can take the resume question. I would say that it's pretty much the same as what you learn at the Career Center, but just in the language in which depending on the type of company or role, I would say that for international companies or for international organizations, the resume that you work on at Duke that's in English will be perfect, in my experience, especially in the business environment. So yeah, no differences in my opinion. In terms of job opportunities, so I've seen a lot of people get relocated. So I don't know if you're working at a company with headquarters in the US and you want to transfer to another office. I think that's a really smooth type of transition if you've never lived in Latin America. Other ways that I wouldn't underestimate are LinkedIn. Like I got my current job via LinkedIn. Surprisingly, I didn't think it was going to work, but it does work. And yeah, I mean, the network, again, that definitely helps to be on the loop of what opportunities are out there, for sure.
Well, if you're interested in oh, sorry, Cipriano.
No, go for
Okay.
it. Go for it.
If you're interested in working in a humanitarian field, I think each organization has its own portal for recruitment. And there, you don't have to necessarily upload a CV, but fill out a questionnaire and a motivation letter. And there are some key questions where you have to describe in a very succinct manner, why are you qualified, what are your credentials, and what you could contribute to the position. So yeah, sometimes it's annoying because each one of these organizations has its own portal, and there's lack of articulation in terms of just having one of them. But I can share with Patrick a list of some websites where you can find vacancies in this field. One of them being Relief Web, but I can share that later with Patrick.
Amazing. Thank you. That'd be great.
No, Patrick, I don't have much to add. I mean, on my experience, resumes are a little bit less important than in the US. At least, for example, at Nubank, that is, again, where I work, one of the largest companies in LATAM. the recruiting experience was much more by referrals than it was by like resume pools. Like the equivalent of Nubank, I would say, is Morgan Stanley, like equivalent big company. At Morgan Stanley, there was a really structured process where the first part was like a resume pool, then you would get picked and get an interview. At Nubank, like if you just submitted a resume, like nobody would look at your resume. So just kind of like emphasis on the importance of kind of like those personal connections, reaching out via LinkedIn. Like again, it's a little bit less of a structured process. So you gotta kind of like add that personal touch. That's kind of my experience.
These are such great responses. Thank you all. I'm gonna, again, I have like follow-up questions every time. I'm gonna stop myself. So we have two questions in the chat that I think are wonderful. Do either of you want to go first and say your own question, or do you want me to read your question out loud if you're more interested? I think they're both fabulous. Anyone who entered your question interested?
Okay. Hi, I'm from Paraguay, and I'm amazed that you actually speak Guarani. So maybe I'm going to visit you after this to talk to you in Guarani, Patrick.
Sí,
Yes.
sí.
Okay. I know that being here at Duke is really easy to feel overwhelmed by the amount of resources and seminars and everything that is going on apart from the actually schoolwork. So maybe just to, if you want to share like some resources or opportunities that we definitely shouldn't miss out to leverage them after we graduate and work in Latin America again.
I can answer that. I mean, on my end, I don't know if you're a graduate or undergraduate, but as undergraduate, we had LASO, which is the Latin American Student Organization. I would say like that's actually a network that has been pretty useful for me down here in Latin America. Many of those who were part of LASO are now working down here. I actually just recommended two people who are under me in LASO to Y Combinator, and I think they got in. So yeah, on my end, I would say like look for those student organizations. One of those being LASO.
For me, I mean, I hate to say that I have regrets because I don't know. I think I don't like that mentality, but I must confess that one of my regrets is not being more involved in those professional clubs, especially as a current finance professional. I sort of regret not being part of the investment club, of business-oriented women. I mean, I didn't put that much attention into it because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do. But looking back, I feel like it's such a great way to meet like-minded individuals who have the same interests and to help you advance on your technical skills. And so looking back, I sort of regret not using that resource as much as I should have.
Well, similar to Patricia, I think when I joined Duke, I was overwhelmed because I was not an undergrad. I attended the law degree with students, most of them American students, whose English level was already super high, and legal language. It's even like a different kind of English. And it was my first time studying law in English. And so also understanding a different way of teaching, the Socratic model, which we don't have that in Latin America. So I have to confess also that I was at the beginning so overwhelmed and learning this new methodology of studying, a way of working, study groups, endless hours at the library. So I didn't have the time to explore other opportunities at Duke. But one of the things I managed to do was to attend a class in a different school that was not offered at the law school. And that led me also to meet other people who had previously worked or who had ongoing research in Latin America. So that's another venue. And I also joined a club on international law at the law school. So maybe where I don't know in which school are you in now, but yeah, maybe there are student associations, and through them you can definitely meet other people that are also interested in your field. And lastly, the Duke alumni, the network has been really helpful for me, because every time I have moved to a new country, I have reached out to the Duke Career Center to connect me with other Dukies that lived in the country that I moved to, and I have made really good friendships, and not only professional connections through their support.
I see a hand. Please, yeah, please join in. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you all. This has been really, really interesting and enlightening. I actually want to ask a question that my friend Kande put in the chat, which I think is really interesting. It's just, how do you translate the concepts, vocabulary, or theories you learned at Duke in English to Spanish or Portuguese? So I know, like, Kande and I are both doing the Masters of Environmental Management, and sometimes there aren't actually like even translations of some of the words or ideas, or what sustainability means look different. So I'm curious if you guys run into that in your field, and how have you thought about that kind of translation in your work?
I'm not the best example because most of my work is in English, and so I will let maybe Cipriano and Johanna speak, but I speak a lot of Spanglish. So I mean, I end up speaking a lot of different languages at the same time. My brain is very confused with Portuguese, Spanish, and English, but I do use a lot of Spanglish, because sometimes the English concept comes to me much faster. And since I work with other English speakers, then they immediately get it. But I confess that's not the best practice. So maybe I will let Johanna and Cipriano answer that question.
Well, actually, for me, it's the same. Like, sometimes there are technical words that come first in English, then in Spanish, and I end up also mixing and speaking Spanglish. But yeah, then yeah, I don't have a concrete answer or a useful tool to share with you. But also, we've been really privileged in our organization, where there is a staff dedicated to do official translations of all of our work, both as simultaneous interpretation or just translations. That's a very important work of the UN because we have 5 different official languages. But for UNHCR, yeah, it's mostly English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, if I'm not mistaken.
And I'll give a Duke answer real quick. So that I'm putting in the chat right now, there is something called CLAC, not my office, CLAC, Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. But CLAC it's a national initiative, actually, and it's called Cultures and Languages Across the Curriculum. So the Duke model, they're half-credit courses. You have to be an advanced, quote unquote advanced, because there's a spectrum there, right? But at least a 3rd year generally and beyond level in that particular language. And then they're content courses. So the idea is you don't have to be in that field. It's a way for you to practice advanced vocabulary about that topic in the target language. So I teach one in Spanish that I taught last year. I hope to do it again the following, because they rotate topics. That's about marketing in Spanish, and specifically around luxury brands often, and wellness and happiness. And it's a really interesting course. But that's specifically one of the things we're hoping to accomplish in that course, is talking through that, right? So, okay, here's a loan word in English. Here's a context way it's used. Here's a couple of the ways you can translate that. Here's ways we're seeing it in the literature, in actual ads from Latin America. Like, so that's just an example. So if you find a CLAC course that works for you, they're open to, grad students and undergrads take them both, half credit. They're a lot of fun. Yeah, got to plug that Duke opportunity. And I am seeing that it is 6:02. We started a few minutes late. I think we should, if everyone's comfortable, maybe take another question. And then I want to respect your time and wrap this up. But I hope to be in communication with many of you after this. And I hope that you've all learned a lot. I've learned a ton. I have like my handwritten notes all over the place here, but I'm so excited to see any follow-up conversations that might emerge after this. But does someone else have a final question or thought? And thank you, the panelists. You're amazing. How lucky are we to get to learn from you?
No,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
organizing.
Thank you, Patrick.
We all want to go back to Duke.
Yeah.
Don't be strangers. Let us know. If you're
Mhm.
able to visit, let us know. I mean, I know schedules are always hard. That's me. I want to go so many places, and prioritize that time with the family here locally. Often the places I want to travel to. But we will get there. So we'll let you know if we're in the region. Please let us know if you're here at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, also at the Career Center. We would be honored to host you. It'd be great.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thanks again.